Okay, let's dive right into this. We talk endlessly about boomers and millennials, right? And we dissect Gen Z like there's some kind of fascinating new species. But sitting right there in the middle is an entire demographic that just exists. Barely mentioned, almost completely invisible. Today in this explainer, we're going to uncover the hidden psychology of Generation X.
I mean, ask yourself, why does this generation, born roughly between 1965 and 1980, seem to just vanish between the louder generations on either side of them? You know the ones I mean. They're your older coworkers who literally never complain, maybe your parents who seem oddly detached sometimes, or the people who actually built the internet but absolutely refuse to post a picture of their breakfast online. To really understand their beautifully complex minds, we need to take a chronological journey back to where it all started.
And that starts with the classic latchkey childhood. Picture this for a second. It's 1978. You're 8 years old, and you come home from school to a completely empty house. Both of your parents are working. There are no smartphones, no Ring doorbell cameras, literally no way for anyone to check if you're okay. You just let yourself in, make a snack, do your homework completely alone, and wait. And the thing is, this isn't just some nostalgic little memory. It was a massively foundational psychological training ground.
And hey, we aren't just talking about a handful of kids here. What's really fascinating is the sheer scale of this. A study published in the American Journal of Orthopsychiatry actually found that by 1984, around 7 million children between the ages of 5 and 13 were regularly unsupervised after school. 7 million. That's an entire generation learning, on a massive scale, that you just can't always count on someone being there.
Now, this empty house did a lot more than just make them self-reliant. It forced them into an environment of extreme self-sufficiency. Psychologists actually have a term for this. They call it a high-contingency environment. Because there was no parental buffer there to soften a blow or mediate a conflict, their actions and the outcomes were directly linked. Your brain had to learn to predict consequences in real time. If you messed up, well, you paid for it right then and there. It's exactly why Gen X tends to think 3 steps ahead in ways that absolutely baffle younger generations today.
So naturally, this leads to them building some pretty thick emotional armor. You see, they weren't just alone at home. They were watching the adult world around them shift really unreliably. Because they didn't have that emotional hand-holding, they couldn't exactly just process their feelings out loud. Instead, they had to develop a protective psychological shell. They quickly learned that if something needed to get done, they had to do it themselves, building this armor to shield against a deeply unpredictable world.
Let's look at the timeline and see how this actually builds. They grew up watching their parents talk a really big game about stability, only to see divorce rates completely skyrocket in the 70s. Then, they're sitting under their desks during Cold War nuclear drills in the 80s, which, as if a wooden desk is going to save anyone, right? They watched corporate restructuring absolutely destroy loyal careers in the 90s, and then bam, they get hit by the 2008 financial crisis right as they're hitting their stride. They learned the hard way over and over again that stability was basically an illusion.
Because of all of that relentless instability, they developed what psychologists call defensive pessimism. It's so easy to look at a Gen Xer and just call them cynical or sarcastic, but honestly, that's completely missing the point. This isn't just negativity for the sake of being negative. It's a highly practical, deeply protective emotional armor. They literally turn irony into a shield. They cross their fingers for good things, sure, but deep down they fully expect the rug to get pulled out from under them because historically, it always did. And this naturally bred a really deep-seated skepticism. Gen X absolutely demands authentic proof over empty slogans. Their entire worldview pretty much boils down to a simple phrase, show me, don't tell me. They watch the institutions that older generations blindly trusted just begin to crack and fall apart. So they doubt polished narratives, they question authority, and they highly distrust anything that feels overly idealistic.
Now let's look at how this pragmatism shows up at work. This mindset translates so directly to their professional lives. Their work ethic wasn't built in cushy modern internships. Oh no, it was forged in raw, archaic jobs that honestly seem kind of unimaginable now. Just think about a 12-year-old taking on a 5 a.m. paper route in the freezing cold, or working a fast food register where you had to calculate the change entirely in your head because the machine broke down. Those were some pretty raw introductions to the adult world.
So when they finally hit the corporate world, they brought this deeply pragmatic mindset with them. Having watched their parents get handed pink slips after years of company loyalty, Gen X figured out pretty quickly that loyalty to a massive corporation is basically a losing bet. Instead, they're fiercely loyal to competence. They don't really care about your fancy title. They respect actual, verifiable skill. They prioritize strict work-life boundaries and hard results way over workplace appearances. They don't want to talk about it. They just want to do it.
So, the crucial point here is, there's this massive paradox at the core of their psychology. On one hand, they are incredibly capable at crisis management. But on the other, this self-reliance basically borders on anxiety. Research actually shows Gen Xers report significantly lower levels of seeking social support during stressful periods. And it's not that they don't have people they could ask, it's that asking for help feels like a major vulnerability. It feels like admitting defeat. Their incredible capability actually stems from an absolute unwillingness to ask anyone for a hand.
Which brings us to their role as the bridge generation. Generation X is literally the ultimate psychological bridge. They are the unique connection point between two completely different eras of human history. They were raised in the old structures, violently pushed into the new systems, and basically forced to adapt without any reassurance whatsoever.
Just consider the massive contrast in their timeline. They had a completely analog childhood, one that was defined by patience, physical presence, and above all, privacy. And then, bam, they're thrust into a digital adulthood characterized by hyperconnectivity and oversharing. They clearly remember life before the internet, but let's not forget, they are also the exact same people who built and mastered the current digital reality we all live in.
Because of that highly analog childhood, they literally learn differently. Cognitive psychologists actually call this deeper encoding. Think about it. Before you could just Google an answer in 3 seconds, information had a physical cost. You would have spent hours hunting through library card catalogs. If your bike chain slipped, well, you didn't pull up a tutorial on your phone, you flipped the bike upside down, got your hands covered in black grease, and you just figured it out. This physical effort meant the knowledge became permanently integrated into their memory. It gave them a really grounded, mechanical intuition about how the world works.
And this brilliantly illustrates why they have such a highly calculated relationship with modern tech today. Because they clearly remember a time when privacy was just the default, they view blasting their personal lives all over social media as a massive risk, not a reward. Their mantra is basically, use the tool, don't become the tool. They adapted to tech because they had to, but they firmly believe that the less people know about you, the safer you are.
Which leads us into their quiet resilience and, frankly, their invisibility today. Moving to their current stage of life, we uncover a deeply poignant reality. In almost all generational conversations, they are constantly squeezed between the massive cultural power of boomers and the loud, dominant internet presence of millennials and Gen Z. They're just chronically overlooked.
And let me tell you, this invisibility takes a really heavy psychological toll, especially as they've become the sandwich generation. They're the ones functioning as the family's middle managers, so to speak, simultaneously raising their own children while trying to care for their aging parents. They carry this hidden emotional exhaustion and chronic stress from literally decades of over-adaptation. They are the invisible glue holding their entire family systems together, all while pretending everything is just perfectly normal.
They don't demand a round of applause. They just show up, carrying immense amounts of stress, figuring things out entirely on their own. But we really have to be careful not to romanticize this fatigue, though, because what looks like heroic resilience on the outside is very often just years and years of suppressing their own needs. They can definitely seem hard to read, or distant, or sarcastic, but the sad truth is they just learned to survive in silence.
They're the generation that literally held the bridge together while the whole world just changed underneath it. So I want to leave you with this final kind of provocative thought. Generation X might just be the very last generation that truly understands what it means to be alone with your thoughts, to be genuinely bored, and to solve complex problems without the internet. What happens to the world when the last truly analog generation finally steps back? Think about that for a while. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and remember to keep questioning what's right beneath the surface.